John chapter 5. The Soliloquy at Bethesda Archives. The fluorescent light over whiteboard C4 had been flickering at a sickening 60 Hz hum for 3 hours, but Arthur refused to leave the room until the endowment paper had a draft. Basement archives of St. Jude's University. Concrete, dust, and the sweet rot smell of old leather bindings. Whiteboard C4 held Arthur's neat flowchart of legal obligations. Boxes, arrows, a Sabbath column drawn with the same hand that had graded systematic theology for 40 years. Chloe's laptop glowed blue against the gray. Julian sat on a stacked pile of unarchived folios in the corner, nursing a lukewarm espresso he had not finished when it was hot. "Look at the syntax, Chloe," Arthur said, tapping a dry erase marker against a printed sheet of Codex Vaticanus transcription. "The hoi iudioi aren't acting out of sheer malice here. They are administrators. They are managing a fragile, occupied society under Rome. If you let people bypass Sabbath protocol whenever they claim a divine mandate, the social contract disintegrates." Chloe didn't look up from her screen, where a Python script was mapping historical resource distribution across ancient Near Eastern cultic sites. "Arthur, the guy was lying on a stone slab for 38 years. 38 years within a structured community safety net," Arthur countered, smooth as a lecture he had already given. The Bethesda pool had an operational framework. It had a protocol. It had 5 porches of human misery waiting for a water ripple that nobody could verify, Chloe said, and turned the laptop toward him. "Heat maps, density, waiting. It's the same logic as our emergency housing grant system. You build an elaborate bureaucratic lottery, make the sufferers fight each other for the top spot, and then call it a tradition of care." Arthur's markers stopped mid-tap. "Jesus didn't just heal the man," Chloe went on. "He told him to pick up his bed, which was explicitly illegal on the Sabbath, specifically to break the regulatory gridlock. He ruined the system's optics." Jules had not spoken in 2 hours. He listened to the hum of the light and the scratch of Arthur's marker. His sneakers were still damp from the rain upstairs. When he finally spoke, his voice was raspy, a decade of newsroom yelling and 2 years of relative silence. "You're both missing the brutal part." Arthur paused. "Which is?" "The guy at the pool didn't even know who healed him," Jules said, leaning forward. "Read verse 13. Jesus slipped away into the crowd. He didn't drop a press release. He didn't start an advocacy organization. He fixed an impossible problem, told the man to walk away from the system, and left." Chloe's fingers stilled on the trackpad. Arthur's eyes went to the page. Jules stood. His sneakers squeaked on the linoleum. He walked to the primary whiteboard and drew a hard line straight through Arthur's neatly organized flowchart of legal obligations. The marker squealed. "The real horror of John 5 isn't the miracle," Jules said, pointing at the second half of the chapter. "It's what happens when the regulators catch up. They don't ask about the man's legs. They ask for his permit to carry a mat, and when Jesus finally stands in front of them, he doesn't debate their bylaws. He gives them the soliloquy." "A defense speech," Arthur corrected automatically, though his voice lacked conviction. "No," Jules said, looking him dead in the eye. "It's a coroner's report. He tells them, you study the texts endlessly because you think they contain life, but you refuse to cross the room to the thing the text is actually pointing at." Silence took the fluorescent hum and made it louder. Arthur set the marker down carefully, as if the plastic might break. "The discourse begins earlier than that, after the healing, after the bed, after they hunt him for Sabbath work. He answers them with the Son who can do nothing of himself, only what he sees the Father doing. That is not chaos, Jules. That is order of a higher kind." "Order that doesn't wait for the water to stir," Chloe said. "Order that doesn't make a paralyzed man race other paralyzed men." Arthur's jaw worked. The chapter is not an argument against care. The porches were care. The feast was care. The Sabbath was care. Rest forced on people who would otherwise be ground into dust by empire and greed. "Then why does the healed man get interrogated for the mat and not celebrated for the legs?" Jules asked. Arthur looked at the transcription again, as if the Greek might rearrange itself into a softer answer. "Because the mat was the visible violation. The legs were the invisible gift. Institutions police what they can measure." Chloe shut her laptop halfway, which is exactly the problem. 38 years. Verse 5. The text names the duration like a diagnosis, and when Jesus asks if he wants to be made well, the man doesn't say yes. He explains the system. "I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. He has learned to narrate the bottleneck instead of the desire. That line guts me every time, Jules said quietly. He's been trained by the lottery. Even the miracle has to compete with the story of why the miracle never arrives. Arthur nodded once, reluctant, precise. And Jesus does not enter the lottery. He does not wait for an angel. He does not certify the man's place in line. Rise, take up your bed, walk. 3 imperatives, then the man is well. And immediately the day becomes a permit problem, Chloe said. Verse 10, it is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed. Not, who restored you? Not, how long were you down? The first official sentence is a citation. Arthur's hand rose, then fell. They are not cartoon villains. They are people who believe the fence protects the vineyard. Then Jesus finds the man later in the temple, Jules said, and his finger found the place without looking. See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. He doesn't leave the man as a walking controversy only. He reattaches the healing to a life that still has a moral horizon. And the man goes and tells the authorities who made him well, Chloe said, which is either gratitude, pressure, or both. The text doesn't tidy his motives for us. Arthur exhaled through his nose. Then the pursuit hardens. Not only the Sabbath work, he was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. That is the leap from optics to ontology, from mat to claim. Jules walked back to the whiteboard and wrote 3 words under the jagged line. Father, life, witness. That's the soliloquy, Jules said. Not a courtroom dodge, a revelation dump they did not request. The Son gives life. The Son judges. The dead will hear. Moses wrote of me, you search the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life, and it is they that bear witness about me, yet you refuse to come to me that you may have life. Chloe's eyes stayed on the page. He names their expertise as the trap, not ignorance, mastery without a rival. Arthur's face had gone the color of old paper. That is the most terrifying sentence in the chapter for people like me. No one filled the air for a moment. Above them, through the high basement window slit, the muffled rush of students lining up for financial aid appointments pressed down through concrete. Voices, shuffling, a staffer calling numbers that never quite matched the hope in the queue. You want to know what this endowment should fund, Arthur? Jules said at last. It shouldn't fund an institute for institutional ethics. That's just building another porch over the pool. It should fund a hammer. Chloe shut the laptop fully. The room went dead except for the buzzing light. Arthur looked at the whiteboard, at the clean academic diagrams he had spent 40 years refining, and then at the jagged line Jules had slashed through the center. His flowchart still showed Sabbath, protocol, social contract. The black stroke cut them without erasing them. A hammer for what? Arthur asked, and for the first time that afternoon, the question sounded like a real one. For whatever keeps a man 38 years from the only voice that can tell him to walk, Jules said. For the part of us that would rather perfect the lottery than meet the person. Chloe stood, gathered her laptop under her arm, and nodded toward Arthur's ruined board. Keep the porches if you must. Just stop pretending the ripple was ever enough. Arthur did not erase the line. He capped the marker, set it in the tray, and left the transcription open to the place where the healed man carried what he was no longer allowed to carry, and walked anyway. Outside the slit of window, the financial aid line inched forward under a sky the basement could not see.